Hi guys, it's Sophie. So this is another Around the World wrap up. The first one I'm going to start with is a little bit disappointing, and that was my pick for New Zealand. So I read Deleted Scenes for Lovers by Tracey and unfortunately I DNF'd this one. I gave it a really good try. I got through to page 176 out of 224 and I don't think I could have given it more of a shot than that. I just really didn't gel with it, though it reminds me of other things other people have liked, if that makes sense. I just really didn't love it. I didn't feel like I knew what was going on in some of the stories. I felt like the characters were all quite interchangeable and they all could have kind of fitted into one another. Didn't feel like I really knew where a lot of the stories were happening. I think I lost some meaning as well with like certain New Zealand slang that I just didn't know, or I thought I knew what it was and then it kind of warped and it wasn't what I thought it was. So yeah, I had to DNF this one in the end. I am counting it towards New Zealand as I feel I gave it a really good shot. But toward the end, I just thought I'm just wasting my day, and this is my last day off, so I really want to read something I'm enjoying, and yeah, it just didn't feel worth the slog, because I'm not going to kind of recommend it to you guys. Yeah, so sadly that was my pick for New Zealand. Sorry to all the New Zealanders out there, I won't think badly of you, I promise. And next we have my pick for South Africa. So for South Africa I read Evening Primrose by Kopano and Matlwa, and I quite like this little book, really little book. It's the story of a medic who's working in South Africa and an event which happens to her in her life before and after that event. Yeah, it was all written in kind of like diary entry style is how it's probably best described, so really short little sections just like that. And yeah, I don't know, I just didn't really get on with it that well either. It's a bit sad. But yeah, it just kind of skimmed past me, I think. It was fine when I was reading it, but I don't think it's one I'm necessarily going to remember. And I feel as though I could have maybe read something a bit more interesting from South Africa. So I'm a little bit sad I picked this one up in the end. Although I will send it for review, so it wasn't as though I spent money on it. It was fine, it just wasn't that memorable. And it's a bit sad that that's my first one from Africa and it kind of just meh. I've got so many more countries left in Africa, so yeah. I'm going to try and read a bit more Africa soon actually. I'm going to try and get on that because I haven't hardly read anything from Africa at all so far. Next I have my pick for Argentina. My Love by Ariana Harwicz. This one was longlisted for Man Booker International. This wasn't the one I picked for Argentina, but I read it first, so I'm going to talk about it with you guys here. I really enjoyed it. I think it was kind of what I needed at the time. I think I gave it 4 stars, or I might have given it 5 stars. It's essentially a story about a woman who is living with her young child, her kind of baby, and her husband, and she has broadly kind of given up, gotten bored of that lifestyle and is kind of going a bit mad. It kind of deals with affairs and relationships with other people, but it's all, the writing is what made it so like wonderful. Like I'll read you the very first line. I lay back in the grass among the fallen trees and the sun on my palm felt like a knife I could use to bleed myself dry with one swift cut to the jugular. There are some really nice turns of phrase throughout here. I really love the like metaphor of the stag going through the whole thing. I thought that everything to do with the stag was just beautiful. And it was just a really lovely, not lovely, but it was a really kind of engaging writing style, and sometimes it was gross. It's kind of pairing, making metaphors of things which clash, which can feel quite unsettling, and I think that fitted really nicely with how they're doing it. And other times it was just kind of really starkly beautiful, but in a way is really strange. So the main character speaks a lot about her relation to nature and how she sees herself as this, almost like this wild thing that's been caged. And those kind of beautiful descriptions paired with the idea of her just again kind of offset things. It reminded me a little bit of Fever Dream in that kind of slightly off feeling that you had when reading it, but I did really enjoy it and I'm really glad that I read this one for Argentina. And next I have my pick for Palestine. So you guys know that I did decide to do Palestine in the end, even though it's not counted as a UN member state, which is how I'm defining my countries. And I'm really glad I did. I picked up I Shall Not Hate by Izzeldin Abuelaish, who I'd never heard of, but from reading the book it turns out he's like quite a famous person in Palestine, kind of around the world. So he was a doctor who treated patients of whatever nationality came into the ward. So he treated Israelis and Palestinians side by side and had no issue with that. He was the first Palestinian doctor to be allowed to work in an Israeli hospital as well, and he focused like a lot of energy in trying to get to the hospital because he had to cross the borderline every time he wanted to do so. And the reason why he's so famous is because his little girls were actually killed in a bombing raid in Palestine by the Israeli military. And he rang a friend who was someone who had some kind of clout in Israel, and he was live on air and he broadcast this man's calls for help as he was kind of surrounded by his family who were dying. So he became kind of jettisoned. He was already quite a large public figure for his contributions to medicine, but he was jettisoned to this focal point that Israeli people could see the face of what was happening in Palestine. He grew up in the Gaza Strip, so grew up with like appalling poverty. Like his little sister used to have to sleep in the washed out like washing up bowl that they used after times, and she died when his brother didn't know she was there and jumped on her. Like it was just so tight and yeah, really hard life. But he is like unflinchingly positive. Yeah, I don't think those things count as spoilers because this isn't the kind of book where there are spoilers. It's more about like his attitude to the entire thing and him bringing a face to Gaza and to Palestine. So if you are interested in that kind of thing, then it is a good one to pick up. I think I kind of wish I'd read something fictional from Palestine to give myself a slightly different feel, but I actually really did enjoy what I read of this. And then last for this one I have Iraq. Now I picked up The Iraqi Christ, whose author I can't remember, and I just wasn't getting on with it that much. So I decided to pick up another book for Iraq, and I picked up Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Sadaawi. This one Acacia Eyes gifted to me for my birthday, so thank you Acacia. I really enjoyed this one. This is the story of a man called Hardy, who is a junk collector who starts to collect body parts in the street and sews them all together and creates something he calls What's Its Name. Not going to tell you too much more about the plot from there, but I'm going to talk a little bit about themes. I hadn't read Frankenstein before I read this one. You don't need to, and from what I've heard of Frankenstein, this sounds like a more interesting retelling of that, and I think it was really good. So kind of themes we're talking about, innocence and criminality, and where is the line between that, the value of bodies, the power of the state, infighting groups, religiosity, belief, and kind of the underside of belief, so the belief in things that are dark and twisted, and how all of the religions kind of feed into these underworld ideas. We're kind of talking a little bit about the freedom of journalism as well, which I quite enjoyed, and really like the relentlessness of bombing and death in Iraq, in Baghdad where this is set. I don't want to say too much about the plot because I really want you to go in like as blind as I did. I think it was a really good way to read this story. I've got a little cat, come and say hi. Yeah, so I think it was a really good way to read this story. It just felt fresh, I suppose, and I don't know whether I benefited from not having read Frankenstein, but God, I would urge you to read it. I read it basically in one go yesterday, though it's not the kind of book where it's like a really pacey, like, you know, thrillery type thing. It's kind of funny, but it's really dark. I just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I think it is well worth the read, even if you haven't read Frankenstein, even if you're not particularly interested in Iraq. I just think it's a really brilliant like retelling of a story. Yeah, I will read Frankenstein at some stage for anyone who's shouting at me that I can't talk about it until I've read Frankenstein. It just wasn't one that was on my school curriculum, and it wasn't one that I've ever kind of felt particularly drawn to pick up so far. It's like Dracula, I've never read Dracula. But yes, I'm really glad I picked this one up for Iraq and didn't kind of force myself through the Iraqi Christ, because I just don't think I would have enjoyed it, and it would have tinged my reading experience a little bit. I love Iraqi literature and I didn't want to read one that was just kind of meh. So yeah, really loved it. If you're interested, do go and pick it up. So that's everything I've read for this little section of Around the World. I've got to go and pick up some more from my shelves. I don't know what I'm reading next. I've sort of decided to do something, but I'll talk about it a bit more in my next video in terms of trying to read more around the world and how that's going to work. But yes, I will see you guys soon for my next one. Hopefully these will be coming sort of swifter in time, though we'll see. I'm not going to make any promises. Yeah, let me know if you've read any of these, if there's anything from these countries you'd recommend, or if there's any of these you really don't fancy reading. Chat to you guys again soon. Bye!